When we hear the words spiritual awakening, we often imagine a moment of clarity, an experience that brings light into the darkness of our minds. But what many do not realize is that after this awakening, when the illusions of life begin to fall away, something unexpected happens. The burning drive, the desire for goals, even the hunger for success can disappear. You may feel empty, detached, and wonder, why do I have no motivation left? In this talk, I want to guide you through 4 key insights drawn from Shaolin teachings and self-mastery to understand this paradox and how to navigate it. Dear friends, at the beginning of any journey, we often find ourselves fueled by an intense desire to achieve something. We look outward at the world and identify goals that we believe will fulfill us. The success we chase, the recognition we seek, the comfort we crave, all of it is based on the idea that these external things will fill an inner gap. We believe that if we can accumulate enough, whether it is wealth, admiration or status, then we will finally feel whole. This belief becomes the engine that drives our motivation. It pushes us forward day after day and moment after moment. The mind tells us that we must keep going because the rewards waiting for us will bring peace. And so we run faster, climb higher and grasp tighter at these external goals. But the moment of spiritual awakening, the instant when something deep inside us cracks open and reveals a truth we had not seen before, changes everything. We begin to see through the illusions that we have constructed. What once seemed so important now appears flimsy and temporary. The success we thought would satisfy us reveals its hollow nature. The admiration of others loses its appeal. Even the pleasures that once excited us no longer have the same effect. This shift is not always dramatic. It can happen slowly, as a subtle realization creeping into the edges of our awareness. It can start with a small question that grows louder over time. Why am I doing all this? The answer that comes is often unsettling. We realize that our previous motivation was built on sand. The promises that external achievements held were never real. We were not chasing truth or fulfillment. We were chasing shadows projected onto a wall. And as soon as we stop believing in these shadows, the motivation to chase them fades. This is not a loss. It is a clearing away of illusions, but it feels like a loss because we were so accustomed to measuring our worth by how well we pursued these external goals. When that measurement disappears, we feel unmoored. The drive that once kept us waking up early and working late seems to vanish. This is why many people feel a profound emptiness after spiritual awakening. The external structures collapse, and there is nothing left to lean on. But this emptiness is not a void to be feared. It is a space of potential. It is the space where you can finally begin to understand yourself, beyond the desires and ambitions that once defined you. You see, motivation that depends on external achievement is inherently unstable. It relies on circumstances that you cannot fully control. You might work tirelessly for years only to find that the success you were striving for is taken away overnight. You might gain the admiration of others only to realize it leaves you feeling even more alone. And even when you reach the peak of your goals, you discover that the peak itself is not what you imagined. It is a lonely place where the questions you hope to silence only grow louder. Spiritual awakening exposes the fragility of these pursuits. It brings you face to face with the truth that nothing outside of yourself can give you the sense of completeness you are looking for. This realization can make you feel as though you have no motivation left. But the reality is that you are being invited to let go of the old kind of motivation. The fire that once burned hot and bright is dying because it was fed by illusions. When the illusions fall away, the fire goes out. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of a different kind of fire, a quiet, steady glow that does not depend on external fuel. This new fire arises from within. It comes from a recognition that your life does not need to be defined by achievements or measured by goals. It comes from the understanding that simply being, fully, presently, and with awareness, is enough. This kind of presence brings with it a natural form of motivation. It is not about striving or forcing. It is about allowing yourself to act in alignment with who you truly are. When you move from this place of alignment, your actions become effortless. You do what needs to be done not because you are chasing something, but because it is the natural expression of your being. This shift is subtle, and it requires patience. It requires letting go of the habits of striving that have been deeply ingrained in your mind. It requires trust. The trust that when you release the chase for external validation, you will not fall into nothingness, but will instead rise into authenticity. This is why the first key to understanding why you feel no motivation after spiritual awakening is to see that what is falling away is not your capacity for action, but the false engine of ambition that was driven by illusion. It was a mirage that kept you running in circles. Now that it is gone, you can begin to listen to the quieter voice within. This voice does not shout, it does not push. It simply invites you to be. And from this place of being, action arises naturally and spontaneously. There is no longer a need to force yourself to chase after things. There is no longer a need to measure your worth by how much you accomplish. You move because it is the natural flow of life. This is the beginning of true freedom. When you let go of the illusions that kept you bound, you are free to experience life as it is, without the constant pressure to achieve more. And in this freedom, a new kind of motivation arises. Not the restless hunger for more, but the quiet joy of simply living. So if you find yourself feeling empty after spiritual awakening, remember that this emptiness is not the absence of motivation. It is the clearing of old patterns, making space for something deeper and more authentic to emerge. Trust this process. Allow yourself to discover the quiet fire within. Before the awakening, your mind was a battlefield where the ego stood tall like a proud warrior. The ego whispered in your ear that you needed to strive to become something great, that you needed to be recognized to feel worthy, that you needed to win over the world to validate your existence. This was the voice you listened to for so long. It was the voice that told you to push harder, to never give up, to always be one step ahead. The ego gave you the fuel to wake up before the sun, to chase after goals that shimmered in the distance, to sacrifice your peace in exchange for fleeting moments of victory. But after spiritual awakening, this voice loses its hold. You begin to see that the ego was never your true self. It was a mask. It was a set of stories you told yourself to feel safe, to feel important, to feel in control. But these stories collapse when the light of awareness shines on them. You realize that the ego is not an enemy. It is not something to be fought or destroyed. It is simply a limited part of your mind trying to protect you from the unknown, trying to give you a sense of identity in an unpredictable world. But once you awaken to this truth, the motivations driven by the ego dissolve. The desire to prove yourself, the need to be seen, the hunger to win, these no longer carry the same weight. You see through them and they begin to lose their grip on you. And this creates a conflict inside you. There are now two voices. The old voice of the ego still lingers, telling you to keep pushing, to keep achieving, to keep proving. But there is a quieter voice, the voice of your essence, the true self. The part of you that does not need to be anything other than what it already is. This voice whispers that peace is found not in striving, but in being, that freedom comes not from accumulation, but from letting go. This is where the tension arises. The ego wants to continue on the old path, while the essence wants to guide you on a new one. This conflict is not a sign of failure, it is a natural part of the awakening process. It is like standing at a crossroads with one path familiar but fading, and the other unfamiliar but deeply resonant. The ego fears this new path because it means letting go of control, letting go of the old measures of success. The essence invites you to step into the unknown, to trust that there is a way of living that does not rely on constant striving. This is why, after spiritual awakening, many people feel paralyzed. They feel as if their motivation has vanished, when in truth it is not motivation that has disappeared, but the false fuel that once drove them. The ego's engine is running out of gas, because its stories are no longer believed. But the essence does not push, does not demand. It simply waits patiently for you to align with its quiet wisdom. This shift can be unsettling. The ego was loud, persuasive, convincing. It gave you a sense of purpose even if that purpose was based on illusion. When that voice weakens, you may feel adrift, unmotivated, uncertain. But this is the space where transformation happens. It is not a void, it is a doorway into a deeper kind of purpose, one that does not shout but gently pulls you toward authenticity. The conflict between ego and essence is not a war to be won, it is a dance to be understood. You do not need to destroy the ego, you simply need to recognize its limits and its role. You need to see that the ego's motivation was always based on fear. Fear of being nothing, fear of being invisible, fear of being left behind. Once you see this clearly, the hold of the ego begins to loosen, and when that happens, the essence has room to breathe. This essence does not need motivation in the old sense. It does not chase, it does not compete, it simply expresses life as it is. This is why after awakening you may find that your old ambitions no longer resonate. They feel hollow, they feel disconnected from your true self. This is not a loss, it is a revelation. You are beginning to act not from the push of ego, but from the pull of essence. This pull is gentle, but powerful. It is the force of life itself moving through you, inviting you to express your unique being, without force, without pretense, without struggle. This is a different kind of motivation. It is not about proving or achieving, it is about being fully present, fully alive, fully yourself. When you act from this place, your actions carry a different quality. They are not driven by fear or desire, they are guided by wisdom and presence. This does not mean you stop doing things. It means you start doing them for a different reason, not because you need to prove something, but because it is the natural flow of your life. This is the path of self-mastery, not a path of domination, but a path of understanding and alignment. You recognize the ego for what it is, and you choose to listen to the deeper voice within you. The old motivation fades, but a new one arises, not loud, not urgent, but steady and clear. This is why after spiritual awakening you may feel as if you have no motivation left, but in truth you are being invited to align with a truer, deeper purpose, one that flows from your essence, not from your ego. Once you make this shift, you will discover a strength that is not based on force, but on clarity. You will move through life with grace, not because you are trying to achieve something, but because you are expressing who you truly are. This is the way of the awakened self, and it is the path that leads not to emptiness, but to profound freedom and peace. The moment you experience spiritual awakening, you begin to see the impermanence of all things. More clearly than ever before, you see that everything you once believed was solid and lasting is in fact in a constant state of change. The people around you, the goals you once chased, the wealth you accumulated, the body you inhabit, all of it is shifting, transforming, fading. This realization strikes a chord deep within you. It is as though the world you once trusted has revealed its fleeting nature, and what once seemed permanent now appears fragile. You look at your life and see how much of your energy was spent pursuing things that were always destined to pass away. The success you worked so hard to achieve, the relationships you built with such care, the possessions you valued so deeply, all of them are subject to change and decay. This awareness can shake the very foundation of your motivation. The goals that once pulled you forward with such force lose their appeal because you see through them. You recognize that no matter how high you climb or how much you accumulate, everything is temporary. Even the body that carries you through this life will one day return to the earth. This truth is not meant to inspire despair. It is an invitation to shift your perspective, to understand that motivation rooted in the desire for permanence will always falter, because the very nature of life is impermanence. If you tie your energy to what must eventually fade, your spirit will inevitably feel exhausted. When you awaken to this truth, it can feel as though all motivation has been drained from you. The fire that once burned with ambition cools. The goals you once chased seem hollow. The drive to acquire more, lose more, and achieve more crumbles, because you now see that these things are like sand slipping through your fingers. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper kind of motivation, one that is not about chasing permanence but about embracing impermanence itself. This shift is subtle and often uncomfortable because it requires you to let go of the idea that you can build something lasting in a world where everything is changing. It calls you to release the need for control and certainty and instead step into a state of presence where you can fully engage with life as it unfolds, moment by moment. This is not about giving up or becoming passive. It is about aligning your actions with the truth of impermanence. When you stop clinging to the illusion that you can hold onto things, you discover a new freedom. You find yourself more present, more alive, more attuned to the flow of life. You act, not because you are trying to create something permanent, but because you are responding to the unfolding moment with authenticity. This is why, after spiritual awakening, the old forms of motivation often disappear. They were built on the false promise that you could create something lasting in a world that is always in motion. When you see through that promise, the fuel for those pursuits dries up. A new kind of fuel emerges, a fuel that comes not from fear of loss or desire for control, but from the simple joy of participating in the dance of life. Knowing that each moment is unique and fleeting, you learn to show up fully to meet it with your whole heart. You move not because you are trying to capture something, but because it is natural to move. Because life itself is movement. This realization transforms the way you experience your actions. Instead of seeing them as steps toward a distant goal, you begin to see them as expressions of your being in this moment. You are not working towards something, you are working with what is here now. You are not accumulating, you are participating in the continuous flow of life. This shift is not always easy. The mind resists it. The ego still wants to hold on to something, to create a legacy, to leave mark. But when you look deeply, you see that even legacies fade. Even the greatest monuments crumble with time. The only thing that truly endures is the way you live each moment fully. The presence you bring to this breath, this step, this action, that is where your true power lies. This is why the realization of impermanence is not a source of despair, but a doorway to liberation. When you stop trying to grasp what cannot be held, you free yourself to experience life as it is. You find motivation not in securing something outside yourself, but in the simple act of living with awareness and presence. Each moment becomes an opportunity to express your true nature, to move with grace, to act with integrity, not because you are chasing something, but because it is the natural flow of life itself. The wave returns to the ocean, not because it is forced to, but because it is its nature to do so. In the same way, your actions become expressions of your nature, not driven by ambition or fear, but by the quiet understanding that this moment is all there is, and it is enough. This is why after spiritual awakening you may feel as though your motivation has vanished, when in truth what has disappeared is the illusion that you needed to create something lasting to find meaning. Now you are invited to find meaning in the fleeting beauty of each moment, in the simple act of being fully present with what is. This shift from chasing permanence to embracing impermanence is where true peace and freedom are found. When you wake up to the reality of existence, you realize that much of your life was spent reacting to external forces. You see how easily you were pulled by the opinions of others, by the demands of society, by the endless stream of thoughts that crowded your mind. Before awakening, you believed that your worth was determined by these external measures. You tried to meet expectations, to fit into roles, to gather approval from those around you. This external orientation created a restless kind of motivation. It kept you moving, kept you striving, kept you from looking too deeply into yourself. The fear of being judged, the desire to be accepted, the pressure to succeed, these were powerful motivators. But they were rooted in a misunderstanding. A belief that your value comes from what others think or from what you achieve. This belief kept you trapped in a cycle of reaction, chasing after validation and running from criticism. When spiritual awakening occurs, this cycle breaks apart. You begin to see that the opinions of others are just passing clouds, that the expectations of society are shifting sands, that even your own thoughts are not fixed or true. You recognize that no one outside of yourself can define your worth. You begin to feel the weight of external judgment lifting, the need for approval fades, the fear of disapproval dissolves, and in this space where old pressures fall away, you may find yourself feeling unmotivated. This happens because the engine that once drove you, the desire to prove yourself to others, has stalled. Without the push and pull of external validation, you may feel as though you are standing still, but this stillness is not emptiness. It is the doorway to a deeper kind of strength. When you stop reacting to external pressures, you begin to listen inward. You discover a presence within you that is steady and quiet, a source of wisdom that was always there, but drowned out by the noise of external demands. This inner presence does not need validation. It does not measure success by how much you achieve or by how well you meet the expectations of others. It is content to simply be, to express itself naturally and authentically. This shift from external reaction to inner presence is profound. It changes the way you experience motivation. Instead of being pushed from the outside, you begin to feel pulled from within. Your actions are no longer driven by fear or desire, but by an inner sense of alignment. You act not because you are trying to please others or avoid their judgment, but because the action itself feels true and right. This kind of motivation is subtle and quiet. It does not shout. It does not demand. It is a gentle pull that arises from a deep connection to yourself. It is the feeling of moving through life with integrity, with awareness, with presence. This is why after spiritual awakening, many people feel as though they have lost their motivation. In truth, they have lost only the old form of motivation that came from external pressures. What is emerging in its place is a deeper form of motivation, one that arises from within and is not dependent on anything outside yourself. This motivation is not about achieving, it is about expressing your true nature. It is not about meeting expectations, it is about living in harmony with the truth of who you are. It is not about reacting, it is about responding from a place of stillness and clarity. This shift takes time and patience. The mind may resist it, The ego may cling to the old ways of seeking validation, but if you stay with the process, if you continue to listen inward, you will discover a new kind of strength. This strength does not come from forcing yourself to achieve more. It comes from trusting the quiet voice within you, the one that knows what is true, the one that does not need permission to act. When you align with this inner guidance, you move through life with a natural ease. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to react to the opinions of others. You act because it is your nature to act. You create because it is your nature to create. You love because it is your nature to love. This is the essence of freedom. The freedom to be yourself without needing validation. The freedom to move through the world without fear of judgment. The freedom to act not from compulsion but from authenticity. And this is why after spiritual awakening, you may feel as though your motivation has disappeared. It has not disappeared. It has transformed from an external push to an internal pull, from a noisy demand to a quiet invitation, from a reaction to an expression. Once you recognize this shift, you will find a new sense of energy, not the restless energy of ambition, but the steady energy of presence. This energy does not burn out. It does not fade with the passing of external rewards. It is constant and clear because it comes from the deepest part of you, the part that is unchanging and always whole. So when you feel the old motivation fading, do not be afraid. It is making space for something deeper, something more real, something that cannot be shaken by the opinions of others or the ups and downs of life. Trust this process and allow yourself to be guided by the quiet strength within you.